Hey there, podcast listeners. Exciting news. My new audiobook, The Short Book Formula, A Financial Professional's Guide to Writing a Book in 6 Weeks to Attract Ideal Clients, is out now. And the best part, for a limited time, we're offering this audiobook to you for free. Hurry over to www.theshortbookformula.com and claim your copy now. And now, on to our show. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the $1 Million Producer Show. I'm your host, Paul G. McManus. Today, my guest is Paavan Kotini. I've been working with Paavan, I want to say, since August of 2023, and we met at an event in San Diego. Since then, we've helped him write and publish his first book that's called Effortless Wealth. Now, the reason I asked Paavan to come on the podcast today is that as I talk to financial advisors about their potential book projects, probably most consistently, there's a couple key questions that always come up. But the one that we're going to address today is, okay, when I publish my book, what's next? And I think this is probably because a lot of people, maybe they've bought into book programs and they've been sent a case of 500 books and it gathers dust. And so we're going to talk about how when you actually write and publish your own book through our process, that we're going to show you through Paavan's example how you can do some really cool things with it. With that framing of the conversation, Paavan, it's great to have you on the show today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. And thank you for having me. I'm excited to share my journey with the book during and after we started the writing and publishing of it.
Awesome. So before we get into the marketing of it and the promotion of it, let's go back to talk about just a little bit the process of where you started, when we met, up until when you published it. So when we first started talking, what was your original idea for the book? Why did you want to write a book? What was your goal behind it?
Interesting enough, I had already started writing something, but it was really overwhelming. I had already started writing, had the thought process of what I wanted to do, but no, I thought I had the structure to it. I think the journey with you helped me really discover what was my intent behind it and really hone in on where I wanted to be able to focus and convey the message to, and just really simplify the process. And there's a lot of educational tips. I know a lot of financial books that are written, but they just collect dust on people's bookshelves, right? And so one really great advice is, Paavan, you do want it to be such a big and thick book, but people buy it and keep it there and don't read it? Or do you want people to actually be able to read it and digest it and then come back to you and talk to you? That was really valuable advice. So we created a very short book, leveraging your short book formula, putting together a few concepts, my story, and the message I want to carry across through that, and in a very concise way. And it was interesting because I really wanted to initially start calling my book SWAN Market Investing, right? But then through the journey, we're able to transform the title based on the content and everything like that to Effortless Wealth. And we put in there the SWAN Approach to Unlocking Wealth for Busy Professionals. So it incorporated both things. My title changed through the journey, and it's been a valuable title. People constantly tell me it's a conversation starter with people.
And I appreciate you saying all that for a couple of reasons. Just to underscore a couple key points is, one is the whole idea behind the short book formula, which is, in my view, the book does its magic, not just by saying I'm an author and going through the journey. I think this might even tie back to the question or the premise of today's conversation, which is that once the book's published, then what? We want our ideal clients to read the book, right? and part of that process is making it digestible enough that when you engage with whether it's your existing clients or prospects, that it's reasonable for them to actually read it and they're interested, because at the end of the day, people who have problems want their problems solved. And the book is a fantastic tool to introduce you to them and how you can help them solve their problems. Just in the writing journey, was there anything else that surprised you or that you weren't expecting or thinking about just during the time that we wrote the book together?
One of the things that I was a little worried about is, hey, if I write everything, then what do people sit with me for afterward? It really was about sharing, and there's no way that if you share it, that they know everything what they need to do and how to implement it and whatnot. In fact, it's the opposite effect, where people that read it, they go, I need to talk, even though they can do it sometimes on their own or whatever, they feel that they need to talk to the expert that has an understanding of it, right? And that was something that was a revelation that sort of happened through the journey, because sometimes we feel like we've done this and we just got to keep it to ourselves. But I knew I really wanted to propagate this out, but a fear that I had was if I share this information, people still want to talk. But in fact, more of them want to talk to me now because of that.
I would agree, and that in my experience has been that's 100% true. Is that, and ultimately the reason why is that nobody likes being sold to, but people like to buy. People like to do their due diligence, and if you give people information, say in a book form that's digestible, they have the opportunity to essentially do their due diligence. And if the book is crafted well, which is what we try to help our clients do, it essentially entices them and compels them at some level to want to take that next step with you. Because,
Yeah.
as you said, it doesn't give them all the implementation secrets. It simply gives them the reasons why and why they should be thinking about doing something. And it's very logical for the person that actually wants to do that to then come to you versus some other person, because the information now it's tied to you and you've framed it in such a way that you're uniquely qualified to help them implement exactly what you talked about. Would you expand on that at all?
Absolutely. And it's just really a confidence booster as well, too. And sometimes you don't have enough time to be able to talk to somebody in depth about what you do, but you can tell them that, hey, read the book, right? Or even if they're a close family friend or something like that. You've talked to them 1,000 times before, but they don't hear you, right? In the same way. But now all of a sudden they look at you in a different light when they read the book and say, hey, these are the things I do need. So I didn't know you could do that stuff. I'm like, I've been telling you 1,000 times, but now it's because it's not about what you say, it's about what people hear, understand, what they take in. And so the book helps us do that. In many ways, it's a business card that is very more in depth than just phone and an email.
I call it a salesperson in print. So it absolutely has educational value, but it's also, if you were to spend an hour or more with a prospect and they came to you and you were going to give them the PowerPoint slide and walk them through all the information in a very educational format, it essentially does that. It duplicates the benefits of that, but it does it in a very non-threatening way, because they can choose to get the book, they can engage with the book on their own time, and then when they read through it they can come to the decision if it makes sense for them to reach out. There's just so many benefits in my mind of using this approach.
Can I share a story around that?
Yeah, 100%.
One of my strategic partners will actually have this book, and when they're having a client meeting, they'll come a few minutes before, they'll be holding the book, reading it, a client they want to potentially introduce to me, right? When the client comes, they'll say hi and whatnot, and the client obviously sees the book in front, and hey, what are you reading? Reading this book, it's pretty good and whatnot. And one of the clients actually asked, hey, do you mind if I read it? Can I borrow it? And so she was like, absolutely, go ahead. And so they borrowed the book, they read it, had all the notes in it and everything like that, read it and whatnot. And she turns around and goes, how would you like to be able to meet the person, right? The author, right? And she goes, I'm actually a personal friend. I can make that introduction happen. And so her client was like, oh, this is fantastic. I'd love to be able to meet the author. And it becomes a really VIP type experience for them. And it makes an easy way for somebody to be able to introduce. She was not selling, she was not pushing.
Yep.
It was by on their own volition that they came out that they needed to be able to have this conversation. It becomes a very easy way for us to be able to pass and introduce my services and me to my strategic partners.
But you shared that story with me at the event, and that really triggered me to want to have you on, because it's stories like that are just, to me, amazing. That's what I live for, is to hear stories like that in terms of how people are implementing it. Is that something how did that come about? Was it your strategic partner came up with that? Did you guys discuss it? And just for our listeners who are financial advisors and they're thinking they have CPA relationships, they have other centers of influence, and they're thinking, okay, I want that. And so how did you create that situation with that COI?
So it actually happened accidentally because she was genuinely actually reading a book.
Okay.
And it happened. And then we talked about it and she shared it. And I said, I wanted to see if this would work. And then so I asked one of my other strategic partners, just can you do this? We had a similar result, right? And now multiple strategic partners will have it, or they'll have it in their office or anything like that and whatnot. And since my face is on there as well, too, When I meet them, they're like, "Oh, you're the guy."
One of the other benefits of authorship, and I don't know that everyone or is aware of this, but it's one of those things in our culture that I was literally doing a webinar with Anton Anderson, who we both know, just earlier this week, and asking him about his experiences. And one of the things that he said, which I'll say now, is that he's probably spent a lot more time working on certain things like his video modules and other stuff that he's built over the years. And the book, relatively speaking, was much easier to create. But he's only seen that people come up to him and treat him differently with higher, more status, more congratulations, and all these different things as a direct result of the book. And he was joking, but no one's ever come up to me and said, "Thank you for creating module 8. That's really made a difference in my life." The book itself, they're like, "Wow, that's really impressive. Congratulations." Is there any other stories or anything else that you can share just from your experience now being, I would say, a local celebrity?
Thank you. But it really has been interesting. I had two incidences, but really, first of all, I'll just say is that there's a higher level of authority that people, it's all about perception and a higher level of authority. I haven't changed as a person, but that perceived value of who I am from their standpoint has changed. And I remember when I went to Atlanta and I was in a line for something, and someone just was like, "Hey," name tag on, and they were like, "So you're Paavan Kotini?" And she goes, I go, "Yeah." And she goes, "Hold on a second." She pulls up her Kindle and she just says, "I just literally bought this book 2 days ago." Right? It was just funny. It was cool for that to happen. Now, I don't think that hasn't happened often. There was no way I would have had that reach unless it was the book. But then I have been called for being a keynote speaker for several different organizations. Now, when I talk to several boards, the person that's introducing me to the board or anything like that, they're like, "Oh, by the way, this is Paavan Kotini. He's the author of Effortless Wealth, best-selling author, whatever." And the board has their attention. So I've been invited to several boards as well too now, right? But it's been just awesome in terms of it gives you a platform to now build upon, right? And have conversations, speaking engagements, and I've changed some of my material to align with the book content and so on in that way as well too. The new frame of thinking for me as well. And I'm really, to be honest, excited about writing my next book.
A couple of things I want to unpack that you said. So you mentioned speaking opportunities. And again, in my experience, for both myself and the clients that I work with, I think having a book and ultimately the authority associated with it and speaking is one of those 1+1=3 activities, right? Just the synergy between them is greater than the parts. Prior to the book, were you looking for speaking opportunities? How was that versus after the book? What changed?
I had the desire for speaking engagements and opportunities. I didn't know where to get started, to be honest. Now, some people are reaching out to me. And if I want to reach out to somebody else, I also feel that, hey, I have a confidence. I built an organization that's successful, but now I also have a book that's successful as well, too. So it gives me a platform to be able to really attract the right engagements that I want.
It's interesting that just the comment is that using Anton as an example, just as a contrast, a lot of stuff he's done prior, we spent a lot of more time. It's been all these things, but it's the book that creates additional opportunities that absent the book, it's harder to do. And you just articulated that you already have a very successful business. Nothing has changed there. It's getting probably more successful as you go forward, but it's the book that I think gives people a window or a bridge to you that gets them where they start seeing opportunities on how they can have you help them, whether it's with their COI, just referrals, whether it's helping them directly, or whether it's opening up opportunities to speak and things of that nature.
Absolutely. And I'll also say that in terms of my own clients, this has been a great way for me to be able to give a gift. In fact, just today, a client came into the office. It's the first time after a long period of time that we're meeting in person. I hadn't seen them since I've published the book, all right? So physically, we've been in virtual meetings. For me to be able to just hand it to them and I sign it and I personalize it or write a message for them or anything like that, it's, wow, cool, thank you, I appreciate it, right? So it's a gift that you're giving to them and they appreciate it. And it's generally like I wanted to be able to give it to them. But what I have seen come out of it is that they'll actually talk about it. How often do people talk about a business card? But like
Never.
the book, hey, oh, this author just signed this for me. I got to
Yeah,
sign. And so they'll actually talk about it to their friends
yeah.
and they'll put it on display on their coffee table or whatever it is, or when they're reading it. And it's just an easy way for existing clients as well
Yep.
to be able to utilize it to be able to introduce other people.
And that's what I tell people is that assuming you do good work, which I'm going to make the assumption that you and I and people listening to this do good work, it's how do you get people to more naturally and enthusiastically talk about what you do? And we're all sitting on these potential raving fans that if only we could unleash would create a lot of activity for our business, but they're just lacking the tool oftentimes to do it in a natural way that makes them feel good and just naturally attracts people to the message. In terms of just the marketing and promotion, is there anything that we haven't discussed that comes to mind for you before we switch gears a little bit?
Yeah, a couple of the things that I've done that I wanted to share is I reached out to my local library, the county library, and found out that they have an author showcase for somebody that's in the county. So I was in Henrico County. So Henrico County did an author showcase where they publicized it on their website and they gave a location in the library where I could do an event and I could talk and I could be able to share my books. So that was a great thing. Another thing that I did is, I don't know if you can see it, but like I created bookmarks.
I see it.
Yeah, and this was something like if I go to events, they can get more information because there's a QR code on it. But if we were giving the book, we'd also put the bookmark inside of the book and then give it as well too. And there's a lot that we've done with events. We actually had a mini golf at an event, and the first place was they get to choose something that was there. And then second place was they would get a piggy bank that we had. And then the third place, if they got all three holes in the mini golf, is they get a signed copy of my book. All right. I was amazed that people were like, can I get a second chance? I really want to be able to get that book. And they were like really trying to get it. It was just awesome. Sometimes we just said, come to the side. I'll go ahead and give you a copy. Right? I appreciate your effort. And the other thing is that because of this, we had a few people that we're currently interviewing right now for interns. They may be kids. This was not an audience that I was talking about and targeting initially with this book. But they're reaching out to me. They're like, hey, you're a successful financial person. I'm looking to get into business and finance in the future. Can I intern with you? Right? So it's nice that it's not always about clients, but it's also about how you can support the community and encourage other next generation. So there's been a lot that comes. I've enjoyed the process. I think that there's a lot more that can be done with the book as well too. Like I wanted to do a book tour. We started off on that journey. We haven't fully leveraged it yet. It's been pretty chaotic and busy. And so it's in a good way. But I think we want to be able to still leverage that for the remainder of the year.
Yeah, definitely. Let's switch gears a little bit. And I know when we first met, you had said you have ideas for multiple books. And a little bit earlier in this conversation, you brought up the thought that you were starting to think about your next book. So part of what I like about the short book formula and part of just the structure of it is that it's designed in such a way that it's not such a heavy lift, meaning that you don't have to go on a year sabbatical to write your book and then you're overwhelmed and exhausted and then you never write a book again. Instead, typically we help people do it inside of 12 weeks or less. And ultimately, what we encourage people to do is that, hey, write the first one, see how it is, the results that you get. And if it makes sense, come back and we can think about a second book. And I know in your case, you were already thinking about multiple books when we first met, but now that you've had a little bit of time to see some results, et cetera, what has you motivated and inspired to take the next step and start thinking about the next book from a business standpoint?
Yeah, there's certainly other topics that I want to be able to cover, specific topics, and I want to be able to utilize the book. And in fact, when I talk to people now, as I'm talking about this book and they're excited, I even mentioned that I'm planning on writing my next book. And they get a little bit more excited about that. So it's not about the book that you have in hand. Sometimes it's also about the book that's coming up. And so they recognize that this is somebody that's going to be not just a one-time author. This is somebody that's doing a lot in that space. And I have been asked for couple of events. There was a group over here that was thinking about, hey, what event can we do in fall? And they were tossing around a couple things, and I opened the opportunity. I said, I'd be happy to be able to do an author showcase and have a book talk and really talk about the book. And they loved it. And so they're hosting it, and it's free of cost to me. It really leverages, it allows me to be able to talk about that book at that time, but also maybe potentially introduce my next book too.
This is a joke, but I'm comparing it to like maybe a Hollywood star who, they're in the limelight and they're getting all the media attention and they're like, yeah, I feel good. And then maybe the movie's old now and they start getting less attention. And I need that next movie because you miss the recognition and all those things. I say this jokingly, but I think at some level it's true.
Because like for us, for anybody else, it's still hot off the press. But for me, I've been working on it for a year now. I'm already onto my next thing and whatnot. So I see the cycle and I see how the plan to be able to create a book per year.
I think for many people, the first book can be just the idea of it's overwhelming. And so we always like to just get people to do the first one. But people that I look up to and admire, and I'll name a few names. You have Brian Tracy, who's world-renowned speaker, coach, etc. And I heard him say that he tends to write a book every 6 months. And it's for those reasons. It's a reason to get back out in the media. It's to do all those different things that create new attention and awareness and ultimately business. Dan Sullivan, who, another known business coach, he actually does a book a quarter, which I think is very aggressive, which is awesome. It just shows that people that are operating at that level, they've honed in on what it takes to really not just build that thought leadership, but to sustain it over time. You think of people, just other people that come to my mind, Tony Robbins, Robert Kiyosaki, I think the list goes on. And what they all have in common is that they have multiple books. Ultimately, it's because it drives their business goals, which is to create more awareness and ultimately more revenue and to be able to impact more people through the work that they do.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Just as we start to wrap up, a couple final questions. Is there anything that I haven't specifically asked about that you think is relevant to this conversation?
Yeah, I would say for somebody that's looking at writing a book, they're trying to figure out what to do with it. The first and foremost thing is that it's not going to automatically market itself for you. You have a tool, but you got to be able to leverage it. So I've changed my LinkedIn banner. I have changed my email signature so it shows that there's this book, right? And then I have marketed it in, like, there's a newsletter or a magazine that we send it out and there's a page in there. And so just at different places and different avenues, but instead of trying to push myself, I'm pushing the book. Inadvertently, the book is pushing me. It's a full circle in that sense. Just think of creative ways to be able to leverage it more and more. I think, especially if you're working with strategic partners, you're in the introduction or referral business, this can be a great way of being able to do that.
Yeah, it reminds me of my first book. It was just time to have this happen. But originally, I was going to write a book called $1 Million Producer and just publish it by myself. And at the time, I was able to develop this strategic partnership with a gentleman. His name was Matt, but he had this whole big community of financial advisors. And so we decided to collaborate and we called it Smart $1 Million Producer, which essentially tied in his branding with my branding. And just, I made $1 million on that over the next several years. And so when you get a little bit creative, and especially as you're dealing with potential COIs, there's so many fun ways to do it, right? Something that I'll just mention as we're talking about it is writing a forward. Who can you get to write the forward for your book, right? There's so many different ways to engage your clients, your strategic partners, and all these different people that I think naturally either want to help you or would be willing to help you, but you need to give them a way that excites them and gets them to feel good. I just love your creativity and all the things that you're doing. It seems to come naturally to you.
I feel like I connect dots and I just see an opportunity. And so it's just being able to leverage the opportunity. So you have a need, you have an opportunity, just put it together. And so to me, I don't feel like it's too hard. I think just for anybody, if you just put a little bit of time and thought into it, you can make a lot more out of it.
And just a final thought there is that, like anything in life, there's a learning curve, right? And so book number 1, you get this result. But now book number 2, you've already gone through the process of those lessons learned in terms of positive lessons, maybe any other lessons. But now you can build off of that and say, okay, these are the things I already know what to do. But what are the other things I could do that I wasn't aware of the first time around? And so ultimately, I think you're building this thing that this momentum that just gets better and better with each iteration.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And as long as we can have fun through the process, it really makes it something that's worthwhile, right?
100%. Actually, I'm thinking about the one question I didn't ask you, which I just want to touch upon, is that part of the process that we did for you in publishing the book was to help you get Amazon bestseller status from a practical level, meaning that you're an author and now you're an Amazon best-selling author. What's the difference there from your perspective?
I think it was about perception. There's a lot of people that write books, but which you feel great about. But the minute you say that you're a bestseller, it just changes the paradigm that people look at you with as, wow, this is accepted. This is what you're telling is something that people are desiring and they want,
Hmm.
right? And so what are they missing out on? A book is about you. Best-selling status is about what the rest of the community is thinking about you,
No.
right? So it's really is like a lot of acceptance, and that's what actually is what is driving the conversations around speaking engagements and things like that. Is that, hey, this is a best-selling author, right? And we should take a really good look at it, right?
Because the reason for that, I'm just thinking out loud here, but is that at the end of the day, what we really want is vetted resources. We want, if I'm
Yeah,
going to hire or ask someone to speak, if I'm going to do a referral, if I'm going to get a center of influence, strategic partner, all these different things, it's like we want to do them, but we're scared.
yeah,
And if we can demonstrate in advance that, hey, this is who I am, this is what I do, it just takes off that layer of fear that I think a lot of people have. And so few people can do that, that you just stand out from the
sure,
crowd massively.
absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciated the conversation, and I hope that our listeners took some notes on this, because what Pavan's demonstrating here is just through his creativity, he's found a lot of different ways to leverage the book once it's published. I bet you in a year from now we'll talk again on this podcast, and the list will have grown from then, which I'm excited for. For anyone listening, Pavan, what's the best way for them to get a copy of the book or learn more about you?
They can go to www.effortlesswealth.com, or if they want to reach out to me directly at Paavan at kotiniandkotini.com. So that's Pvan at Kotini, KOTINIANDKOTINI.com. You talk to them.
Perfect. And we'll put that in the show notes. Again, thanks so much for your time, and looking forward to our next interview a year from now. I've already scheduled it.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. I appreciate it. Enjoy all the help that you guys and your team has done as well, too.
Thank you.